Tonight we have 7 stories, from stories of missing people, creepy houses, the woods, and more. A huge thank you to tonight's writers. Remember to send in your story if you'd like to have it featured. Stories can either be submitted at my subreddit r/slumberreads or the email you can find in the description. Be sure to drop a like if you enjoy. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Also, at the time of me recording this, we just reached 75,000 subscribers. I wanted to say thank you guys. I'm always trying to put out the best content possible, and it's pretty cool seeing how far we've come, even if I'm still just one guy telling stories into a mic in the corner of my bedroom. Anyways, on to the stories. Stay safe out there, enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. My sister Tara ran away for the first time when she was 13 years old. At the time, I was only about 5 years old, so I didn't actually understand why. It was on a chilly October night that didn't seem very out of the ordinary. At the time, we lived in a small 3-story apartment bordering the more rural parts of the small town we lived in. My mom woke me up from my nap to ask if I'd seen my sister. Since I was just a little kid at the time, I didn't feel very concerned about the fact that my mom couldn't find her. I was just grumpy because my nap was interrupted. I didn't really understand the seriousness of the situation until late into my life. That night, my mom searched the entire building for her. She went to the roof a few times because my sister always sat on the roof when she was upset. Eventually, my mom called in reinforcements to help find her. We never called the police because the police in that town weren't good people, but that's a different story. My uncle arrived within about 30 minutes. My sister was gone for almost 4 hours at that point, and my mom's anxiety filled the room. My mom tried to break down possible places my sister may have gone. As she began heading out, she realized I was still quietly playing in the bedroom. She brought me along and we searched the town. Finally, we ended up at the train station. The train station was fairly empty because the last train left at midnight, and we were there around 11:30 p.m. We ran from one side to the other, my small legs struggling to keep up. Mom only picked me up for short distances before her arms got tired. Her brow was stuck in a permanent furrow. "Tara, Tara," I shouted with my shrill voice echoing off the walls. There she was standing glassy-eyed towards the tracks. She held the hand of a man. No, a giant with matted black hair and sunken eyes. He seemed to have hair in every visible part of his body. I felt a chill looking at this man. "Tara, what are you doing?" My mom shouted at the top of her lungs while sprinting towards her. My uncle had already approached them and pried Tara away from that strange man. Her expression hadn't changed at all. She was in a daze, an unrecognizable foggy look in her eyes. She gave a slight nod to the man, and he simply started walking away. My mom and uncle were torn between making sure Tara was okay and going after this man. Mom felt afraid to be by herself with both of us because she was in such a fragile state. My uncle stayed with us that entire night until my mom felt safe again, making sure to imprint the image of that man in his mind to deal with him later. Tara never speaks about what happened or who that was. To this day, she still acts like it never happened. But even though I was young with hazy memories, I remember that event very clearly. I wish that was the end of it, but that's only where it started. Like I said, that event was only the first time Tara ran away. As time passed, we forgot the events of that night, but Tara once again started behaving oddly once she turned 17. Tara was a very outgoing, friendly person normally, but a few months after her 17th birthday, she became quiet and cold. We were living in a different apartment this time with only 2 bedrooms. The apartment complex was nestled in the suburbs, very different from the more rural area we had lived in previously. I had to share a room with Tara, and I thought it would be fun until it was time to sleep. I was already a light sleeper, so I wasn't surprised when I shot awake at 3 in the morning. I sat up and perched my ear in the direction I heard the sound. There it was, a high-pitched giggle coming from my sister's bed. That giggle quickly turned into a boisterous laugh full of malice. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew my mom wasn't hearing anything because she was on the other side of the apartment. I chose to be brave and slowly walked up to Tara's bed. She was lying face up with her eyes half open. Her eyelids twitched, and I very clearly saw the whites of her eyes going back and forth. When I approached her, she became quiet. Then I saw a wicked grin forming on her face. She started laughing that same evil laugh again. I felt frozen in fear for a long time. I somehow convinced myself it was okay, and I was imagining things. But I couldn't go back to sleep when laughter was filling the room. It was driving me mad. I felt a sharp pain in my stomach, and left to use the bathroom. White light pooled over the bathroom, bringing my attention to the stark contrast of red in the sink. Upon closer inspection, I saw that the sink was stained with blood. Fresh blood. In an instant, I ran out of the bathroom to my mom's bedroom. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I knocked repeatedly with no avail. Beams of early sunrise began to filter through the living room curtains. The warm sunlight helped inspire a new courage inside of me. I can't be afraid. I need to see if my sister is okay. I hesitantly entered my bedroom to be greeted by a blissful silence. Within minutes, I discovered another large pool of blood soaked into the bed sheets surrounding Tara. From the corner of my eye, I thought I saw Tara forming a sly side smirk in her sleep. I once again ran to my mother's door. This time, I had awoken her successfully and quickly went over all the details of the night before. I saw the same expression of anxiety and worry on my mom's face that I had seen 4 years prior. She burst into Tara's and my bedroom to see the same thing I had. Tara was in the bathroom by now. I could hear her soft humming mixed with the shower running through the bathroom door. Mom frantically crumpled up the sheets and picked up the blood-stained pillows to put in the wash. "Don't ever tell anyone about this. We won't talk about it, okay?" Mom said to me with the most stern voice and equally stern expression. "But what? No, everything's fine. It'll just stay between us, so just forget it." I knew she wouldn't tell me, so I let it go. I still really wanted to know what happened, but as time passed, I forgot about this incident too. We started noticing a pattern of odd behavior in Tara. Every 4 years, right before her birthday, she would do something crazy. When she was 21, she got incredibly drunk at a party. Why not? That's what 21-year-olds do. She eventually passed out, so her friend drove her home. They staggered in around 1 a.m. when the commotion started in the living room. I was awake watching TV in our bedroom, so I stepped out to see what was happening. Tara's friend was furious. His face was beet red, sweaty, and he was telling my mom that Tara needed help. He showed her the marks on his neck from when Tara tried to strangle him. Tara lay drunkenly on the couch, just chuckling at the situation unfolding before her. My mom apologized profusely and even offered to pay the man. He didn't want any of it. He just said that if Tara ever comes near him again, he would call the cops. He dashed out of the apartment and slammed the door behind him. Mom was sobbing by now. She kept asking Tara why she would treat her friend like this. Tara just shrugged her shoulders and pushed out some nervous laughter. I could tell she was beginning to sober up a little. "I was drunk, Ma," Tara said with her words slurring just a little. "That's not an excuse. Why do you show no remorse for your actions?" Mom's words were also slurred from her continuous sobbing. Tara shrugged once again. Then she turned towards my direction and locked eyes with me. I jumped back from shock and ran back into my room. I covered myself up to my head with my blanket. Will Tara finally get the help she needs? Unfortunately, no. When I asked, Mom claimed that in our culture, we don't believe in therapy. She also believed that Tara will get better on her own. She was proven wrong once again when Tara turned, you guessed it, 25. Mom was making decent money by this point from switching jobs, so she put in a small down payment to buy a house. I was so happy to finally have my own room, so much so that I basically never left it. It was on an unusually warm October night. I was taking a nap after school when it was cut short by my phone's ringing. I groggily looked at my phone screen and saw that it was Tara's boyfriend, Cole, calling me. I hesitantly picked up the phone, wondering why my sister's boyfriend was calling me. "Hello?"
"Have you seen Tara?"
Cole asked in a panicked voice. I thought she was in her room."
"Well, is she?"
Is she not?
Can you go check, please?
I can tell Cole was getting impatient with me. Annoyed and frustrated over not being able to finish my nap, I trudged over to Tara's room and knocked. No answer. Another knock. No answer. Finally, I decided to just barge in to find an empty bedroom with Tara's usual mess. I picked up the phone again. Yeah, she's not in here. Maybe she went out. I said matter-of-factly.
Well, I've been trying to call her all day and she hasn't been picking up. I messaged her on Facebook and she won't answer there either. Can you call her for me? If she's upset with me about something, I'd at least like to know, so I can give her space.
I agreed and hung up. Then I called Tara. To my surprise, I saw her phone light up in a fold of her blanket. What? Why would she leave her phone? Her cat lethargically walked up to me. It looked like he hadn't been fed all day, and his water dish was bone dry. I fed the cat quickly with Tara still in the back of my mind. I decided to search every room of the house. I even checked the backyard and our small tool shed. Then I saw it. Tara's car was still parked neatly on the driveway. She had to be around here somewhere. I called my mom to ask if she'd seen Tara, and, like some kind of switch, I remembered clearly the time Tara ran away the first time. I told my mom my suspicions, and she left work right away. I also called Cole, and he rushed to our house. I briefed Cole on the problems Tara had in the past. All of this was new knowledge to him. He berated us for not watching over her better and not getting her the help she needed. I felt guilty. I knew there was more we could have done, but we didn't have time for all that now. We had to find Tara again. Cole had a lot of police friends, so he knew the protocol of reporting a missing person. He knew that not enough time had passed, and since Tara was an adult, the case wouldn't be taken seriously. Cole and my mom went through the neighborhood with a flashlight to see if they could find her, while I stayed in the house, thinking of what may have happened to Tara. I ventured back into her room to look for clues. Her books were strewn around the desk like normal, but this time, the pages were torn up. Some of them had obvious scratches ripped into the pages. I also noticed a rug in there that I had never seen before. I lifted it up and fell backwards in shock and disgust. Right under the rug was a large putrid stain of vomit and blood. I covered my nose expecting the smell to fill the air, but surprisingly it didn't smell anything. It looked a little like Tara tried to clean it up perhaps hours ago. I remember that I knew Tara's iPad password, so I logged in. Maybe I could find something in there. I looked through her text messages. Turns out that she messaged her boss early in the morning, claiming she couldn't come into work because she had food poisoning. I looked over at the stain on the carpet. Maybe she was telling the truth. But why would she leave if this was the case? I scrolled through messages from other people from that morning, and I found one that I thought was odd. It was from an unknown number, and it simply said, "See you soon." I clicked on the text, but it had gaps in the conversation. Many of the texts were deleted, only leaving bits and pieces of the conversation like, "Yeah, I understand. What for?" Just irrelevant sentences that made no sense without context. I held the tablet against my chest. I knew I had found something important. I ran downstairs and waited for Cole and Mom to come back. They returned only 10 minutes later full of worried sighs. I quickly showed them the text messages. My mom didn't think much of it, but Cole found them interesting. He said sometimes if you call a phone provider, you can recover deleted texts. We would have to wait till morning to do that though, and we were hoping to find Tara before that. My mom was in the kitchen making phone calls to all the relatives living around us. I was surprised to see my mom so calm during this, which was so unlike her. Within a half hour, some of my cousins, aunts, uncles, and Cole's parents showed up to our house. We split up into small search parties in hopes of finding Tara. Since it was 8:30 p.m. and the sun had set, we decided it would be best to look in our immediate areas for the time being. The road within our neighborhood connects to a bigger road that splits in two directions. My search party chose to go left in the direction of two parks. We went to the park closest to us first. My cousins searched the playgrounds and restrooms while I walked the small hiking trail. The trail didn't have any lights, so I had to enter the woods with only my small phone flashlight guiding me. In the darkness, I felt like I had heard Tara's voice. I jumped up and ran towards her voice only to emerge at the other side of the trail. My cousin approached me to ask if I saw or heard anything. I just frowned in disappointment. We headed to the second park shortly after. There was an unusually long baseball game happening that day, so every inch of the park was covered in people. It was hard to distinguish one person from the other. As we moved through the crowds, I finally made my way up to the hill, where the trail in the bordering forest starts. I could see everything in the park from there, but something in my gut told me she wasn't in the crowd. I turned around and peered into the woods. I saw a moving figure in the darkness that almost looked like Tara, but I convinced myself it was just my imagination tricking me like in the previous park. My cousin and I felt defeated, so we headed back home. Before entering my neighborhood, I saw my mom just standing next to the street sign looking toward the empty road. Her face was in a permanent grimace, and her frown lines stood out more than ever. "What are you doing, Mom? Let's go back inside." Cole called the cops. They're willing to make a report since Cole is friends with them, and they'll send a detective tomorrow. Well, that's good. What are you out here for? I don't know if he needs to come tomorrow. I think Tara will come back today. How do you know? I just do. Let's go back inside. We can wait for her there. Mom followed me inside. We were greeted by Cole's parents trying to comfort him while he sobbed in his hands. I felt bad for Cole. I knew no one has ever loved Tara as much as he has. Mom left the door unlocked just in case Tara came back. We all slept downstairs that day, hoping the sound of Tara opening the door would wake us up. At one point, Mom and I startled awake to the sound of the door, but it wasn't Tara. Cole had been out again looking wherever he could in the dark. Mom convinced him to get some sleep no matter how restless he felt. The next morning, I was greeted by what felt like a crowd of people gathered in our living room. My mom was in the kitchen making large amounts of coffee while Cole went over the game plan with his friends. I counted 8 people and 3 dogs. Cole explained to me that these were some of his friends from the canine unit that will help track down my sister's scent. Each dog was given a different item that belonged to Tara to smell. Then we got to work. I was with the group that used a bloodhound. Tara's smell seemed to be everywhere, and I was beginning to question the accuracy of a dog's ability. That wasn't until our bloodhound latched on to one of Tara's scents heading towards the park with the baseball field. That dog led us straight to the trail in the woods next to the park where I thought I saw Tara the previous night. Something about this didn't seem right and gave me goosebumps all the way up my arms. The dog stopped in the middle of the trail and turned. He led us onto a small, unmarked trail off to the side that led us into a neighborhood I didn't know existed. The dog stopped right at the road that went through the neighborhood. We all stood there very confused. Why would the tracks just stop on the road? We all looked at each other, thinking the same thing. Someone might have picked her up there, but why would she be picked up at this seemingly unknown neighborhood? Was she kidnapped? We canvassed the entire neighborhood to see if they saw anything strange. The only lead we got was that someone was picked up by an ambulance at the nearby park on the same day. We asked the house across the park if they saw anything. The man told us he did see someone matching Tara's description go into the park. He also told us the thing about the ambulance. By the time our group returned to my house, we all had a strange feeling at the pit of our stomachs. What could have possibly happened to Tara? Cole frantically began calling every hospital he could think of to see if she was brought in with no luck. We spent the next couple of days putting up flyers, asking locals, and we even got the news to put up our story. It was hopeless. Our detective was unhelpful and didn't work weekends, so he wasn't available during the most important times. Cole had lost his life within his body. He refused to eat or sleep. He wouldn't return to his apartment. His parents tried to get him home, but Cole refused, knowing Tara would come back for him. Mom was the same way. I, however, felt emotionally numb to the situation, having dealt with Tara's breakdowns throughout the years. I still looked for her though. I wasn't a monster. I still wanted my sister back. About a week later, a man called me saying he saw Tara sitting on a bench. I dashed downstairs and told everyone right away. Cole didn't hesitate for even a second. He got into his car and sped out of the neighborhood towards the location the man described. I got in my car and followed suit. I was driving along a road when I saw Tara walking in the direction of our house. She had bruises all over her body, and she was holding a torn-up book in her hand. I stopped the car in the middle of the road. unafraid of what the drivers behind me may think. At almost the same time, Cole had stopped his car going in the opposite direction. He must have seen her at the same time I did. He ran out of the car sobbing and hugging Tara. He was babbling incoherent words between sobs. I stood frozen looking at the scene unfold behind me. Tara's eyes were glassy with the same expression I saw when she was 13 years old. She set her gaze on me and smiled, coyly. The book in her hand was stained in blood. That was 4 years ago. Cole and Tara are happily married and live in a house far away from us. Cole got Tara the help she needed right after the incident, but I haven't heard anything from them in a couple of months. It's almost fall. I wonder if Cole is going to be okay. It was already 4:30 p.m. when I finally put down my phone after a long day of moving furniture around. I finally sunk into my new sofa, but of course, the second my exhausted butt sat for the first time in hours, my doorbell rang. I groaned and got up to get the door. Halfway there, I froze. I realized that I had just moved in, and the only people who knew my address so far were my parents, who had a key. This house was actually an amazing find, especially for someone fresh out of college with an okay paying job. It was cheap, especially considering all the benefits. It was a 3-bedroom house with a nice, spacious kitchen and big windows, in a nice and quiet neighborhood. The landlord was nice enough, if a bit mysterious. She wouldn't tell me anything about the house itself, and refused to talk about the previous tenants when I asked why anyone would give up this house, but was flexible with rent and very open to help with any issues. Tiptoeing the rest of the way to the door, I carefully looked through the peephole. All I could see was my peaceful new neighborhood. Looking down, I saw something right outside the door. Checking again that there was no one outside, I opened the door slowly and took the box. It was a small cardboard box with no information anywhere on it. I went into my kitchen, cringing at the bright yellow wall. That would take a while to get used to. Grabbing my pair of scissors from the drawer, I cut open the box to find a small black pen drive. This is where I should have stopped, but being a curious man, I took the pen drive to my bedroom where my laptop was and plugged it in. There was a single file on it, a video named movingday.mp4. I opened the 30-minute video. I plugged in my earphones and clicked play. It was a POV style video. I watched as the person walked around their apartment collecting miscellaneous items such as tape, a screwdriver, a paperclip, and some rope. The way this person moved made me feel unsettled. It was almost robotic, but I kept watching anyways. As I watched, the person went to a car, threw the bag with the items in the trunk, and got into the car. I was confused as to why I had received this, wondering if it was a prank or something like that. As the car began moving, I paid attention to the scenery. Some non-identifiable places flashed by the windows before the driver began to slow down. I was at about 22 minutes in by now. As I looked closer, I saw what looked like my street. A chill ran down my spine as I saw the peaceful houses on my block out the car window. As they got out of the car and used the paperclip to open the door, I became increasingly uneasy. Was I watching a robbery? I was overcome by dread, concerned about what I would witness next. As the door swung open, the person walked into a bright yellow kitchen. My kitchen. But there was a little girl watching TV on a couch that wasn't mine, with a woman I didn't recognize. I quickly realized these were the previous tenants. I should have stopped watching, but I couldn't. I watched, terrified, as the camera swung towards the person, changing the angle for the first time. My blood ran cold as I saw a man dressed in all black with the most chilling smile I'd ever seen. It was far too wide, as if it had been carved in. The lips were bright red, as if they were covered in blood. Then there was yelling. The woman was begging the man not to hurt her little girl. They had money, he could take everything. After that, the man ran towards them, and the camera fell to the ground. Blood-curdling screams, and then silence. As I closed the laptop, horrified at what I had just seen, I wondered who had sent me this. I reached for my phone to call my landlord and ask about the previous tenants, because surely this was fake. It was probably a sick joke to scare me. As my hand touched the bedside table, I realized I had left my phone in the living room. As I went to grab it, I heard faint rattling, almost as if someone were using something to pick the lock. Then, I was face to face with that smile. That goddamn smile. "10 years ago, I was in a coma for a year. However, I awoke in another dimension. Something happened that makes absolutely no sense. I lived in the city of Grand Fort in the country of Southern Norman, which by all accounts does not exist. Even 10 years after last seeing a glimpse of my previous life, I still clearly remember it. I was an 18-year-old who lived in a shitty apartment on the outskirts of the city. I had just started college and lived in one of the most dangerous and crowded places in the city. I really didn't want my life to go downhill, but I needed a break. After arguing for days, me and my buddies finally agreed to come with me on a road trip. Me and my friends were going to stay at a campsite not far from a famous national park. However, things didn't go as planned. About halfway through the drive, a distracted driver swerved to avoid another car. I quickly spun my head to see what was going on. By the time I noticed the vehicle barreling towards my sedan, it was already too late. The distracted driver's vehicle hit me, causing me to lose control. My car swerved towards oncoming traffic as my friends watched in terror. I wish I could say that we regained control and stopped safely. I wish I could say that the distracted driver got justice and everyone made it out alive. But unfortunately, things didn't go as desired. I tried to regain control before I could hit the minivan that we were headed towards. I really tried to save my friends' lives, and the innocent people that were in the minivan. All I ended up doing is making the situation worse. The minivan ended up hitting the passenger side of my car, killing my friend instantly. My friend in the backseat was ejected and also killed. The world around me fell apart in an instant. In a moment, my whole world was destroyed. The last thing I remember is watching in indiscernible agony as the distracted driver drove off while a shocked crowd of onlookers stared in deafening silence at my crumpled car. Then I blacked out. After what felt like eternity in darkness, I felt a rush of electricity. It almost felt as if a rush of memories suddenly flooded my brain. Memories that were not mine. I suddenly had memories of going on vacations to places that I had never seen before. I suddenly knew countries which in my dimension did not exist. I saw a version of my family that was rich and powerful, something that anyone would dream about, except this is now something that I now have nightmares about. It's like I relived a life that was not mine. It didn't only come in the form of thought, but also with visions. It was something even the wildest of minds couldn't imagine. I saw 18 years of my life fly by right before my eyes. It's something that cannot ever be forgotten. It is something that bewildered me and made me question reality itself. But these visions wouldn't be like this for long. In my visions, I was approaching the time where I was involved in a serious car accident. As things became closer to the day I was put in a coma, things started getting weird. It wasn't like anything supernatural, but more glitch in the matrix kind of stuff. Now that I think about it, I feel like I was experiencing the same things right before the car wreck. The day that I was put into a coma, my other self was also put into a coma. His days started off like usual. However, at around the time I was involved in the car accident, I was walking down an alley. Suddenly, a group of thugs turned the corner and approached me. Seeing my expensive shoes, they attacked. They punched me, beat me half to death, and stole my shoes. But things were different for my doppelganger. What I saw is something that terrified me, yet fascinated me. What I saw is the creator of existence, the creator of endless dimensions in which we are considered insignificant. Only after that experience did I know what gods were capable of. We have souls, and our body is just a physical way of displaying our emotions. But the creator of existence can toss our souls into the void, where dead souls go. Even if your soul is not dead, you can still be thrown into the void. Now I know something went wrong, separating me from my dimension. I don't know how this happened, but it just did. All the meanwhile, I was just a soul floating around in the void. I didn't have a purpose, nor was I worthy of returning to my world. I was just a spectator, watching time fly by and having no real purpose. It happened so quickly. One second I was in the void, the next I was someone again, except the someone was not me. Immediately after this, nurses rushed in. I was in a hospital and was being treated for head injuries, which had been caused by a mugging. After the shock had subsided, I asked the nurse what happened. "It's better you relax," she calmly said. Not long after that, a group of unfamiliar faces crowded the room. Except I knew these people as my family. These people looked exactly like I saw in the visions. The memories of another person. Life changed after that. No one would believe my story, and they would just dismiss it as head trauma. I guess maybe they are right, but I remember a life in which things were different. I didn't know about disasters such as 9/11 and the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki until the year after I awoke from my coma. But after 10 years, I have adjusted to my reality and life. But one question always lingers in my mind. Where did my doppelganger go? Only now have I come to accept that it's impossible to go back. Even if it were possible, it would be better that I were to stay in this realm. I have many questions, but none to answer. I would appreciate if you would comment and help me find answers. My life has progressed, and I have steadily come to realize that we should enjoy life. I've started a successful business and have changed my lifestyle. But one thing is concerning me. Remember I mentioned the glitch in the Matrix? Well, that's been occurring lately. I don't want to come to the conclusion that I'll be thrown back into the void where I'll be for eternity. But that could be the case. This could be the last time anyone hears from me. But always remember, the void is something that should be taken seriously. As for all the readers out there, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to heed my warning. Signing out. A few weeks ago, I received a bag of seeds in the mail. The seeds inside looked like sunflower seeds, but they were the size of a chestnut. When I was standing at my mailbox, the morning just started. I was still wearing my pajama pants and a t-shirt, which I wore in bed the previous night. The seeds were wrapped and sealed in a plastic bag. On the plastic bag was a sticker with the company's name and logo. Frankie's Green Thumb. My dad used to work as a farmer, and of course, I picked up some of his botany knowledge. These were seeds I've never seen in my life, nor on my father's farm. Since I lived in the Midwest, and I had an enormous backyard, I could plant the seeds. My curiosity controlled my actions with the seeds. I was itching to plant them. When I retrieved them, I failed to notice a piece of paper inside the bag. I pulled the plastic bag open, and immediately I smelled the glamorous aroma. I don't know how to describe it, but it smelled like lavender and fresh laundry. I then dig my fingers in the bag and pull out the little piece of paper. The paper had a welcoming note written. "This has been sent to you by Frankie's Green Thumb. This is a gift sent to you by us truly. We hope we see you buy more of our products. Thank you. From Frankie." I have never been, bought, or used any product from Frankie's Green Thumb, but I accepted the gift. I shut the lid of my mailbox and made my way inside my house, then into my backyard. In my backyard, I was already planting fruits and vegetables. A variety of plants were already fully grown, and some were just sprouting out of the ground. Since I had a patch of land in my garden, that's where I planned to plant the seeds. I placed the bag of seeds on my outdoor table, then go inside my shed with all my farming tools. I didn't know how to plant these seeds. They didn't look like the average seeds people plant. Standing there in my shed, I started to think if there was a special way to plant these seeds. Then I remembered the little piece of paper. They would have written the instructions on the back. In my pocket, I pull out that small paper. I was right. They had written instructions on the back of it. It started with the traditional instructions every seed product had. Make sure to water it daily, use fertilizer, all the basics. They didn't have instructions on how to plant them, so I planted them like any other seeds. In the garden, I used my trowel to dig a hole 5 inches in the dirt. I started to scramble around, forgetting where I placed them, until I spotted them on the outdoor table. I stuck my trowel in the ground and go retrieve the seeds I left. I grab one seed and leave the rest on the table. The seed felt like a smooth stone, unlike the other seeds. I get back on my knees and drop the seed into the hole. With the excess dirt, I used my trowel to cover and smooth out the dirt on top of the seed. Now I just have to wait a couple of weeks to see the difference, I thought to myself. I put my trowel back into my shed, and I go back inside my house to finish packing my things. During the time I have gotten the seeds in the mail, I planned a vacation to go see my older sister for her birthday. She was turning 40 years old, and I wanted to celebrate it. It had been 10 years since I saw my older sister, so I wanted to surprise her. I got in contact with her friends over Facebook, and I shared the plan I had to go surprise her. They all agreed with me to not say a single thing about the plan I had. I had 42 hours to finish packing my bags. So after planting the seed, I immediately started to pack. Every time I leave for vacations, reunions, or business trips, my neighbor, Rachel, would always house sit for me. She had a kid, but he was old enough to stay by himself while she stayed at my place. Her father was also a farmer, so she knew how to maintain my garden. I always tried to pay her for taking the time out of her week, but she would always deny the cash. I thought she was insane denying $100 for her generosity. But as they always say, you cannot buy another person's generosity. It was the day before I left for Michigan. Rachel was over at my house at the time. We were talking about the new seeds I received in the post. I said if she forgot how to maintain the seeds, even though I doubted her to forget, she should go into my room and grab the little paper with the instructions on it. She hesitated on using the instructions. She would always say she knew how to maintain a garden better than I could. She thought she was spoiling the plants by maintaining them better than I. Her ego soon went away after I showed her the bag of seeds. When I saw her priceless reaction to the seeds, I laughed my ass off. It is quite hilarious to see someone's ego soon turn into confusion. She started to question where I got the seeds and why they're so big. I shrugged and told her about Frankie's green thumb. She giggles a bit, then agreed to watch my house over the weekend. When I reached for cash in my wallet, she immediately denied the cash before I even pulled out my wallet. Cannot buy another person's generosity. In Rachel's case, of course. I should have known not to bring up finances, but I just had to for her sake. For her to get out of her way to help watch my house, you had to pay her. But as the nice and cocky woman she is, she denied the $100. When I woke up the morning I left, I noticed the new plant. That seed I planted 2 days earlier already sprouted. I'm not talking about a stud in the ground, but it grew leaves and a stalk. It was at the height of my leg when I first walked up to it that morning. When Rachel came over, her mind exploded at how fast the plant grew. The leaves were spiking, like the leaves on poison ivy. The stalk was thick, like the width of my arm. All I could do was laugh at the fact that Rachel's ego vanished at the sight of it, like it already hasn't the night before, her eyes wide when she walked through the back patio door. That much of a difference in 2 days? She had a tone of confusion in her voice, like the confusion I had when I first saw it. I know, I just woke up this morning to see the plant already grew 26 inches in just 2 days. I replied. She walked over to me with her morning coffee in hand, wearing pink sandals. She looked at her coffee and joked, I need to stop drinking Folgers. I chuckled at her response. She did as well. I pat her on the back and say, well, see you in 3 days. She looked at me with her eyes full of dread. I could tell she was genuinely surprised. Wish me luck, she joked, sighing deeply. She took another sip of her coffee and groaned. It's not that I don't want to maintain the plant. It's that the plant is growing at an alarming rate. You'd be lying if you said you weren't a little surprised. She was right. Someone would have lied to themselves if they weren't surprised or alarmed. Right as I was about to go back inside the house, Rachel told me to wish my sister a happy birthday. I waved at her and said not to worry. And then I went on with my journey up to Michigan. About 14 hours later, I finally arrived in Detroit. The night before her birthday, I booked a hotel nearby. The next morning was when her friends would sneak me into my sister's house and surprise her. When I finished unpacking my one suitcase, I got a phone call from Rachel. I answered the phone, and immediately I heard Rachel at the other end of the line. It grew its first flower, she said, surprised. Wow, what does it look like? I asked. She cleared her throat and then said, a nebula. It looks like a beautiful nebula. There was a slight pause. Brian, I think this company created a new plant species. Looks like they chose you out of all people to plant this. Genuinely, I felt surprised. In my mind, I thought about all the things that could happen if it was a new species. Is it invasive? What is its last form? Is it actually a new plant species, and not something that already isn't known to botany? All of the ideas in my head went rampant. I still never came to a conclusion. After that phone call, we hung up. After we hung up, I got in contact with one of my sister's friends. She ran me through how she was going to sneak me in and where she would hide me. After about an hour of chatting, we settled, and I went to bed soon after. The bed of the hotel wasn't the best bed I slept on, but it was manageable. When I woke up the next morning, I could now meet my sister after so many years. I got up, showered, brushed my teeth, and got dressed. I didn't have a gift for her, and I didn't actually plan to get one. I thought that the surprise of me driving 14 hours would be a good enough present. The hotel was an hour from her house. I searched for her address on GPS, and it created the quickest route. Off I went to my sister's house. So she couldn't see my car, I parked my car behind a tree next to the road. When her friends arrived in an SUV, they got out and walked to my car. Only 3 of her friends received an invitation, so we planned for 2 of them to walk in, pretend that the other friend got stuck in traffic. After she snuck me in and hid me in her laundry room, she would pretend that she just arrived. About an hour later, she would pull me out of the laundry room and hide me under her big dining table. When my sister starts to cut the cake, I would crawl out from under the table and surprise her. After we went over the plan again, we put it in action. The 2 girls went inside, the other snuck me in through the back door. My sister gave all of her friends an exact copy of her house key, in case of an emergency. I entered the laundry room, and she went back to the car. 10 minutes later, I could hear the last girl walk into the house through the front door. They chatted for an hour until I heard one of her friends tell my sister she had a cake waiting for her in the car. When she went to the car with my sister, the other 2 got me out and hid me under the dining table. Under the table, I could hear them enter the house. They set the cake on the table and started to sing happy birthday. Their voices were off tune, but that didn't matter. After they sang happy birthday, instantly my sister asked if any of them got her a present. One of the girls kicked my back, which was a sign for me to get out from under the table. I crawled out of the table and yelled, "Surprise!" My sister almost fell out of her chair after I popped out of nowhere. "Brian, how did you get here?" After everyone chuckled at my sister's amusement, I started to unravel our plan. She got up and hugged me, then started to sob on my shoulder. "Brian, it's been 10 years. She cried. "I know, that's why I'm here." I joked, even though that was the reason for my appearance. After we had some cake, watched some movies, and just caught up with each other, we all said our goodbyes and left. My sister wanted me to stay over since I drove 14 hours, but I denied, saying I already paid for a room at a hotel. During the hour drive back to my hotel, my phone buzzed in my pocket. At a convenient stoplight, I pulled out my phone and opened it up. 16 missed calls from Rachel. After seeing the amount of missed calls, I gasped. I didn't have voicemail, so I couldn't play the call back. I tried to call her back, but no answer. After 6 tries, she finally answered. Nothing but silence, until she abruptly hung up. When I went back to my hotel, I tried calling her again, but no answer. The same night I left my sister's house, I left to go back home. Something was wrong. Rachel never missed a single call. This was out of the ordinary. Theories about what happened to Rachel started to float around in my head. A robbery, kidnapping, a homicide. All of these conclusions started to make my apprehension rise and rise. The 14-hour drive was the worst 14 hours of my life. Just the thought of her dead rattled me. When I arrived, the sun began to rise. I pulled my car into my gravel driveway. The house looked fine from the outside. Nothing changed. In my car, I kept my pistol. I made sure it had ammunition just in case. I didn't know if someone uninvited was still on the property. I slowly get out of my car and quietly shut the door with one hand. I walk up the gravel driveway trying my best to not let the rocks crunch under every step. With my pistol drawn, I opened the front door to my house. Luckily, I oiled the hinges. Not a single noise from the door. I walk in with soft footsteps and softly close the door behind me. Lightly, the door shut with the smallest noise. I tiptoed around the house into the living room, then into the kitchen. When I entered the kitchen, I looked out of the window to my backyard. When I say my heart dropped, I mean it. I slowly lowered my pistol down at the sight of my backyard. The plant wasn't a small house plant. It wasn't a tree either. The plant I planted in my backyard wrapped its roots around my shed. The plant absorbed my shed, full of my gardening tools. I walked from the kitchen to the door that leads into the backyard. I took deep breaths before I swiftly opened the door with my weapon drawn. On the side of the shed hung a giant flower. When Rachel said the flower looked like a nebula, she told the truth. The petals of the flower had multitudes of purple, blue, white, and black spots. As I slowly inched myself closer to the giant flower, I accidentally stepped on something. I looked down to realize that I stepped on Rachel's coffee mug. Coffee spilled and absorbed into the ground. I walked a little closer. The pistol is my protection. The flower petals were sharp with pointed edges, like the leaves. I noticed Rachel's phone on the ground, like her mug. Her phone laid under the giant flower, but something laid next to it. When I got a little closer, I realized to my horror that it was Rachel's pink sandal, the sandal she wore the morning I left. My heart was throbbing like a blood clot. My stomach churned in apprehension. Besides my walking, my feet were shaking. My pistol bobbed up and down from my jittery hands. During this entire dilemma, I started to think about if the pistol would have worked if anything attacked. Now I stood right in front of the ginormous flower petal. Thoughts of the plant eating me alive, like in the little shop of horrors. I stared inside the flower for a good 10 seconds. That's when I lowered my weapon down just a smidge. The stigma of the flower stuck out like a sore thumb. I could see the stigma release a yellow powder into the air. The powder got into my nose, which instantly dazed me. I became so dizzy that I had to sit on the ground. I almost blacked out until I felt something wrap around my ankle. I looked at my ankle in a dazed state. What I saw would forever haunt my mind. The stigma began to open like a mouth, revealing 1,000 razor-sharp teeth. The sound of opening stigma sounded like crushing cabbage, or the sound of pulling flesh. Vines from the plant started to crawl up to me, growing at an alarming rate. In my dazed state, I pushed myself backwards, the roots and vines only inches from my foot. The vines then successfully wrapped around my foot, but in my panic state, I tugged my leg, which broke off the vine. More of the powder circulated into the air, like pollen during the spring. I knew that the powder would make a person dazed to move, so I covered my nose with my shirt. I finally got to my feet, but my pistol wasn't in hand. In my horror, I realized that my pistol became absorbed by the vines, then ingested in the vein-like vines. I didn't have a weapon. All I had were my hands. Knives would have never worked because it was too big. The pistol was useless anyway. What damage could the bullet have done? As the plant ingested the pistol-like food, my apprehension forced me to climb the fence. Halfway into my neighbor's yard, I felt the vines wrap around my leg and try to pull me down. In retaliation, I ripped the vines again, like string cheese. With inertia, I fell face first on the ground. My back cracked loudly after I fell in a curled pose. As I picked myself up, I noticed the roots creeping above the fence. I ran all the way to the opposite side of the yard. Rachel lived on the last row of the 13 houses, which formed the neighborhood. So if someone were to jump the fence, they would be in one of the many fields in Nebraska. I jumped and grabbed the fence. I then pulled myself up to see the field next to the house. Just one quick glance, I could see the roots and vines travel at a fascinating speed. After that, I fell into the fields and ran. Before I could distance 100 feet between the vines, sharply pointed stalks poked through the ground. They were sharp enough to impale a man, sharp enough to kill. They poked like sticking toothpicks in the ground. I dodged the stalks like landmines, weaving in and out. As a few more stalks poked, they just stopped. Distancing myself, I finally get the chance to glance back at the houses. My house covered in roots and vines like my shed. Vines crept and then covered the house to the point that I couldn't see it. So I ran away from the houses. I swear I could hear the screams of Rachel. Her screams begged for someone to save her, but there is no way I would be able to. She is long gone. I love nature. I can't get enough of it. Well, I grew up nearby, and my father would always take me along with him. He would show me the ways of gathering, foraging, and hunting. He also told me to always respect the land we walked on, to only kill when necessary, and use only enough that is needed. Never allow greed to consume you. Take what you need and respect the land. Those 2 rules he would always tell me each time we walked in the woods. Then one day, I remember how my father and I came across 2 dreadful creatures that did not follow the 2 rules. It had been early in a summer morning that I ran through the bushes and under the trees that I heard the sound, a sound that echoed like a thunder. My father ran to my side, nestling us behind a thick of brush and trees. That is when I saw one of the animals of the woods cry and beg for help. Just thinking about that deer brings sadness to my eyes. Its wound appeared as if something had gone right through it, making a small but deadly sized hole in its chest. It bucked and cried as it laid there on the ground. I began to rush out to hurt the poor animal, but was stopped by my father. He held a finger over his mouth. I sat there quiet as I watched 2 tall creatures emerge from the bushes. They leaned over the dying deer. They seemed to examine its horns, with one of the creatures beaming with glee. As the deer continued to move, one of the creatures took a long stick and stuck the stick in the head until it died. My father covered my mouth, not wanting the creatures to hear my cries. My tears ran down his thick hand. My father stroked the top of my head in a way to calm me like mother would do during a thunderstorm. The 2 creatures began to pose in strange ways with the deer. All the while, their faces continued to show their joy with their kill. I heard one of the creatures speak to the other. One of them left only to return on a strange object that carried more dead deer. There had to be 7 deer that the 2 creatures had killed. They laughed and laughed. Why? Why would they do such a thing? Yes, my father and I killed deer, but only what we needed. Yet these 2 creatures seemed to only kill because it brought them joy. Why would they kill like that? Why don't they follow the rules? Suddenly I felt my dad's hand leave my face. I looked up to see a horrible, evil scowl form on him. My father grabbed a rock and tossed it at the 2 creatures. They jumped in shock. My father continues to throw more and more rocks at them. He nudged to follow his lead. My father and I threw rocks non-stop at the 2 creatures. They looked around frantically, wondering where the rocks came from. But my father was smart. He knew to stay hidden. Then my father let out a horrible sound I never heard from him. The 2 creatures backed in fear, jumping on their machine. They fled just as they appeared. My father and I emerged from the trees. I kneeled down to the deer that they had left. My tears fell down upon the body. My father stared in the direction the 2 creatures ran with that evil scowl on his face. Yet as he heard me whimper, his attention turned to me and his scowl vanished. "I know," he said. "It's a sad thing to see indeed, how those things can just kill and kill. Yet I don't blame them. That's their kind. It's their nature." "But why, Father?" I cried. "Why could they do such cruel things? There are even times I don't like to kill deer. I prefer to watch them or play with them. They're kind and gentle creatures." My father placed a hand on my head. "I know, son. Even I love the deer. I love all the animals in this place. That is why we only take what is needed for us to eat. We never do what those dreadful creatures do. They just hunt for sport." Tears continued to fall from my eyes. "But why, Father? Why are they so evil? Aren't they like us?" "Yes, my son, but they even fear us. Unlike us who would scare their kind off with a fight, their kind would do whatever they can to capture us and maybe even kill us. I don't understand. Why we can't understand each other like our ancestors did. Why do they fear us? Why do they kill for sport? Why do they not follow the 2 rules? Why, Father?" My father shook his head. "I'm sorry. I cannot answer those questions. I don't believe anyone can. I dried away my tears. But Father, what really hurts me is that they call us those names. I have my own name. You have your own name, as does Mother. I looked up at my father. Why do they call us Sasquatch? When I was in high school, me and my friends would always hang in the mall. One day we got bored and decided to explore other places that surrounded the mall. Across from the mall is a Walgreens that went out of business a few months prior. My two other friends, Noel and Cameron, decided to see what it was like over there. Well, Cameron said he had a feeling that we shouldn't go there. We asked him why. He responded with, "Someone else could already be in there." I looked at Noel. Noel looked at Cameron like he was stupid. "Why would someone be there?" Noel's son. Did you forget where we live?" Cameron's son. "We live in Georgia. It's not necessarily the safest part of it. A lot of crime, robberies, murders, assaults. Those kinds of things happen where we live. We decided to toss a coin. If it landed on heads, then we would go to the Walgreens. If it landed on tails, then we would explore a different place. I flipped the coin and it landed on heads. We decided to wait an hour before going there. Noel thought it would be a good idea to drive there instead of walk in case something happened. When we arrived, Noel made sure to face the car towards the road. We watched the abandoned store for quite some time. It was about 1 a.m. when we decided to finally head inside. At first, we foolishly tried going through the main door. The door was one of those doors that opens automatically when a sensor notices that you are about to enter the store. Noel said, "Let's pry it open." "That's going to trigger an alarm," I responded. "Let's go through the back door." Cameron annoyingly said. We made our way towards the back door. Cameron knew how to pick locks and he kept his tools in his backpack. After we made it in, the first thing that we noticed was that the emergency lights were still on. I forgot to mention that we couldn't see inside the store because it had wooden boards on it. This place was ransacked. It still had the shelves, but they were mostly empty. We all decided to go to different areas of the store. I was looking in the back area of the store where they kept the extra items. I heard some noises that sounded like footsteps above me. I dismissed them, thinking it might have been an animal. I walked back to Noel and Cameron to see what they were looking at. They were looking at a cash register. "Do you think there's money still in it?" Cameron asks. "Can't you open it and find out?" Noel said. "Oh yeah, I guess I can." Of course, there was no money inside the cash register. After that, we decided to go near the refrigerators. There were bottles of spilled drinks and unopened drinks near and inside them. Why do you think they left all of these here? Right after I said that, we heard footsteps above us. "Is someone above us?" Noel asked nervously. "Let's get out of here," I yelled. As we were making our way towards the exit, we heard loud pounding against what sounded like some metal thing inside the ceiling. As soon as we got out, we ran into the car and sped like hell out of there. Before all this happened, I told one of my other friends, David, that we were going there. A few weeks later, he told me that he went to check the place out himself. He told me the place had an awful smell. I thought that was odd because I didn't remember a bad smell. And when I asked Noel and Cameron, they said that they didn't remember a bad smell either. David then said he called the police to check the place out because something didn't feel right. After hearing what he told me next, my blood ran cold. Someone got stuck in one of the air conditioning vents above the ceiling. The police said that he was there for at least a month. The police found a ladder and said that the person used the ladder to get onto the roof. It turns out the man in the vents was a person who escaped a mental institution that was a mile away from the Walgreens. Someone eventually bought that building and turned it into a Dollar Tree. I was surprised that this wasn't on the news or online. I don't think many people would go to the store if they knew what happened right above them. This happened years ago when I was about 17. I'm 30 now, male for context. When I was a teenager, I lived in Marin County, a quiet suburb just north of San Francisco. However, most of my buddies lived in San Francisco, and most nights of the week, I could be found riding my bicycle back and forth across the Golden Gate Bridge. I enjoyed those long bicycle rides at night. I'd often be high as a kite, iPod on my favorite playlist, passing by weirdos and street urchins, or admiring the desolate beauty of the bay, Sausalito, an empty Embarcadero. One of my favorite places to ride my bike was through the Presidio. The Presidio is the last neighborhood you pass in San Francisco before making your way onto the Golden Gate Bridge. It's famous for its old, beautiful military housing, an old airfield, and hangars that have been converted into a seaside park, and enormous eucalyptus trees and forests. At nighttime it's dead quiet, and the only people you can see out are late-night Chinese fishermen on the pier down on the water, or people flying down the freeway into the city. Anyways, this one night I was coming back from hanging out with some friends and riding my bike through the Presidio on my way home. I was leisurely gliding down the hills when I noticed a single, older black car, something like an Oldsmobile coming up a road perpendicular to the one I was coming down. As I got closer, the black Oldsmobile took a left, blinding me for a moment with its lights as it passed. I didn't think much of it at the time. Here and there you might see a couple cruising to go make out by the bridge, or a car full of kids going to smoke a joint at the old pet cemetery beneath the highway overpass. A few minutes later, I had mostly climbed the hill that took you closer to the entrance of the bridge and looked down on Crissy Field. This road is dark with barely any lights, and I was enjoying looking down towards the water to my right when I heard a car coming from behind me. I looked behind me and saw the same old black Oldsmobile maybe 20 yards behind me with its lights off, strangely driving at a slow crawl. I tried to wave them past, but the car just kept on rolling slowly behind me. It was too dark to see who might be driving. The fact that the car had its lights off almost immediately struck me as a red flag, as well as its obvious slow trailing behind me. I gave it a few more yards and tried to wave it past again, but nothing. Spooked, I made a sharp left on my bicycle and began bombing down the hill in the opposite direction of the Oldsmobile. This route would take me back deeper into a more secluded wooded area by the cemetery and air hangars. For a moment, I felt relieved until I heard a screeching of car wheels and glanced behind me to see the black Oldsmobile, lights still off, now passing behind trees coming down the same hill as me. The Oldsmobile had to have made an extremely unusual U-turn, especially considering how narrow the roads are in the Presidio. Terrified now, I began pedaling faster away from the Oldsmobile, but as I picked up pace, so did the Oldsmobile, and it was quickly gaining my tail. Using all my strength, I pedaled as fast as I could up a small hill and jumped off my bike, throwing it off the edge of the road to the left into some bushes and quickly jumped off the road to hide. Hanging off of the side of a hill, hidden in ivy, I was just below the road. I looked up but couldn't see anything, but I could hear the black Oldsmobile pass. I waited, and a few minutes later I heard the car slowly approaching. No indication from headlights, and then passed by, again and again and again. For nearly 20 minutes or so, I hid in the bushes as I heard the Oldsmobile pass back and forth overhead. Finally, I mustered the courage to get back on my bicycle and ride as fast as I could back to the bridge. In the darkness, listening to myself pant, it felt like forever, but finally I could see the glaring bright lights of the Golden Gate Bridge. But then, again I heard the car. I looked behind me to see the Oldsmobile again trailing me. I fucking smashed and made it to the parking lot of the bridge toll, rode up the pedestrian sidewalk next to the toll, and got off my bike under the light and chain smoked for a while. I never saw the car pass onto the bridge, nor did I see it again once I made it to the Marin.